ballet megastar on Russia, Rudolf Nureyev. Project 2, organize your speech. Time 13 to 15 minutes. Please help me welcome Sire John Roberts.
I'm going to pay him for that later. Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, welcome guests and new members. In 1948, a mother with her 3 young daughters was traveling on the Trans-Siberian Railroad to see her husband in the military in Vladivostok at the Pacific coast end of Russia. And she gave birth on the train to her son Rudolf, who became probably one of the most famous men in the world during his lifetime. The world that he was born into scarred and shaped his entire life. It was Stalin's world. Stalin, who makes Putin look like Pierre Trudeau. Stalin, who killed 50 million Russians, twice the number that were killed in World War II. He killed his own people to subjugate them. It was not enough to be born into that sort of terrifying world, but he was a Tartar. And they were a very ancient people who had subjugated the Russians at one point, and the Russians never forgave them. They were called dirty Tartars, which was sort of like using the N word down south. And the Tartars were mostly Muslim, except for his parents, who were both dyed-in-the-wool communists. He was living most of his youth in Ufa, Russia. In the winter in Ufa, the average temperature for the high is 0 degrees Fahrenheit. It's colder than Moscow, and that's cold. That's cold. He was born into a world of abject poverty, third world poverty. When he was 5, his father came home from the military. They moved in with his brother in a 30 square foot dirt floored room with his mother, father, 3 kids, sisters, his uncle and aunt and their children, and an outhouse in Russia in the middle of winter. Can you imagine? He wore his sister's dresses until he entered school because there was no money for clothes. They didn't even alter it, just little lace dresses. He ate potatoes for weeks on end, and as an adult, he had malnutrition problems because he had respiratory problems as a result of that malnutrition. The way he got out of it was he started ethnic dancing. This is some of the ethnic dancers. Both of his parents were from different ethnic groups, and he started dancing for the Bashkir, which was his mother's side. And they had a lot of returning soldiers during this period. He would dance in the military hospitals. And even as a tyke, he was getting a lot of attention. And because of that, 2 successive ballerinas who had been dancing with the Kirov in St. Petersburg, Leningrad, they had been exiled for political reasons. They both took him under their wing, one and then later the other, and they laid the groundwork for him. At age 12, he got accepted into the Ufa Ballet. He had decided he wanted to be a ballet dancer because his mother, who had no money, found some way to take him and his siblings to see the ballet, and he said, "This is my life." He felt for years that the ballet, that his late start in ballet was always a problem for him. And he was with the Ufa Ballet for 5 years. And then when he was 17, he was accepted into the Mariinsky Theater, which is the home of the Kirov. The Kirov is the #1 ballet school in the world. It's just on a different level. It was the home of so much of the ballet. A lot of it was created there. He was a beneficiary of an amazing stroke of luck. He became the prize pupil of the greatest ballet dance teacher in the world, who was Pushkin there. And it was good because he was willing to work with him, because Rudy was very difficult. Very difficult. Temperamental. All the great dancers are temperamental. He had it out the wazoo. He didn't get along with his peers. You know, in communist Russia, everybody had to conform. He didn't understand conformity. He did his own thing. And one of the things that he did that was so strange, it was really strange, is he started learning the Ballerina Steps. Guys never did that. They never did that. He said his legs were too short. He needed that extra extension to look good on stage. He wanted to look fabulous. Well, of course, it wasn't too long before all the male ballet dancers in the world started doing that same thing. He started it. He also started as his teacher. He started something else that changed the entire industry. Before he came along, with the exception of Nijinsky back in the turn of the century, it was all about the ballerina. Ballerina was everything. The ballet dancer was just there to support her. And he didn't want to have anything to do with that. And so he elevated the male dancer, even starting when he was in school, to be equal. And he was already getting more applause than the premier dancers in the most important ballet school company in the world when he was a student. And he was accepted into the Kirov full time. Now these are some truly astonishing images of him jumping. That really is how high he could jump. And what is really extraordinary, ballet stars always start out in what's called the corps de ballet, which is the chorus, like the chorus, in the background. Not him. He went straight to being a premier dancer from the very get-go. And right after he started dancing, Khrushchev. How many of you have heard of Khrushchev? Even you youngsters, some of you youngsters. He was the head of the Soviet Union when I was growing up. And he sort of opened it up after Stalin. He wanted, before it had been very isolated, and he wanted them to start going to the West to show some of the great art forms. So they had a trip going to London and Paris. And they weren't going to take him because Rudolf was trouble. But at the last minute, the pressure mounted, and they finally relented. They wouldn't let him be first cast. But all the people in the West had heard about him, and all of his performances were the ones that were sold out. So he was the star of the show. And he started going out at night, which you cannot do. He was already doing that in St. Petersburg. But he would go out at night, and the KGB, which was the Secret Service, would follow him around. Well, it was at this point that they realized, even though he slept with women, he slept with men. And sleeping with men in Russia, then and now, is pretty much on the same level as being a cannibal. It's the worst possible thing. So when he was getting ready to go to London, he was getting on the plane, and they pulled him aside and said, well, your mother has fallen sick, you're going to have to go home. He knew. He knew that they knew that he was having a fun time with the wrong sex. And he knew it was going to be a lifetime in prison camps in Siberia for him. So he immediately dashed over to the French and said, please give me asylum. No one had ever done this before. No one had ever defected from the Soviet Union before. This was front page newspaper on every newspaper around the world. This is how he started becoming a really major star. And it was immediately after this that Nureyev started becoming one of the great stars. And one of the things that was extraordinary was when he was in the Kirov school, they kept him on an extra year. This was also something that was never done. And in this year, his teacher, who was the greatest teacher in the world, taught him the choreography for all of the major Russian ballets. And you know how some people can read something and never forget it? He could see a step and never forget it. And when he went to the West, he was able to bring all the great Russian ballets with him, choreograph them, give them to us, and I'm going to stop this for a second. And he was able to get royalties from this, which started he became a very, very wealthy man. He just broke so much ground. Now, this is going to be a short little interview with him, so you can just sort of see his personality. He was not only a very handsome man, but he had that thing, that thing, he grabbed your attention. He's talking about his youth growing up in Russia.
The present situation will be that they're not allowed out of the country, and you're not allowed back in.
Well, I'm probably allowed back in, but not out again.
You've never had any regrets about it at all. Do you have a sense of belonging anywhere?
Dance.
Just dance.
Now I'm going to show a little brief clip about him dancing. The video quality is bad, but it's from the very first performance that he did on American TV on the Ed Sullivan Show. And there's something about this performance, even with the bad video quality, you can see how just amazing he was, especially at the beginning of his career. He was just unbelievable. And keep this in mind. They say that video only conveyed maybe 15 to 20% of the impact that he gave you in a live audience. Live audience, he was maybe one of the most charismatic performers in any field of all time. So, watch this.
Male variation from Tchaikovsky's Sleeping Beauty.
He was noted for his ability to be moving and then all of a sudden come to an absolute still stop, which is very difficult to do. Wasn't he amazing? Yeah. Just amazing. And the thing that's so great about it is that, it was all very elegant, but he was very masculine in his moves. It was very, macho, the Russian. I really enjoyed sharing with you this stuff. To me, it's just a fascinating story, and I hope you enjoyed it.
What can I say?
Got one job. Got one job.